Evening, everyone. Today is Monday, March 27th, 2023. Today is a remote participation only meeting. This meeting and hearing of the Ayer Select Board will be held via remote participation only in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. This meeting will be live on Zoom and Channel 8. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom meeting ID number 897-9080-0793 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100 prior to the meeting. Okay. So if I can get everyone to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any changes to the agenda tonight?
I do not have any, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I see Mr. Pombrian has his hand up though.
Oh, Robert?
Madam Chair, if we could table the ratification of the cable license with Comcast to the April 4th meeting.
Okay. Any objections?
No objections.
Okay.
Set any other changes?
I have none.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Seconded. All those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
Chair says aye, and Sean will be joining us soon. Okay. All right. So the agenda has been approved. Anyone here for public input?
Hi,
Yes. Aye.
Michael Hamill. I just with the site selection for the senior center.
Uh-huh.
Is that still on the agenda for tonight?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll speak then.
Okay. Anyone else here for public input?
Same thing.
Okay.
The senior center.
Okay. Did anyone want to have their question posed now so we can be addressed later? No? Okay. All right. Anybody here for public input? Okay. I don't. All right. It does not look it.
No.
Okay. And we still got a couple, we got 2 minutes before we can do the water and sewer rates. All right, so I asked that everyone stay on mute, except for the speakers. Okay, this will help with all the background noise that we get sometimes. Please use the hand function to if you want to ask a question, and I will do my best. I'm going to be, if I look distracted on the screen sometimes, that's because I'm actually trying to see if anyone has a question. Okay. Oh, yes.
I will probably say something at the site selection committee.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so again, like I said, everyone stay on mute. I will do my best. I'm gonna, like I said, if I look distracted, I'm not distracted. I'm actually trying to make sure that if anyone has a question that I recognize them. And it gets hard on Zoom sometimes. So, but if we all just and then when you do go to speak, please, let us know who you are and your address. Okay. Okay. So got about a minute. Okay.
Madam Chair, do we have the public hearing notification that needs to be read? I don't see it in the packet unless I'm missing it.
I did not see it in the packet.
I was gonna just share the screen when it's time.
Okay. That
Okay.
works. Thank you.
All right. If you could share the screen.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it's
Oh.
Jeff Tillotson.
Mhm.
Can I take a moment to announce that the recycling committee wants to do the town-wide cleanup on Saturday, April 22nd. We'll be at the town beach and more information will follow.
Okay. So
That's actually
on-
Earth Day. Thank you.
Okay. April 22nd, Earth Day is the townwide cleanup.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, everybody ready for the public hearing?
Sorry, trying to get my screens organized here. Thank you, Carly. The Air Select Board will be conducting a remote-only public hearing on Monday, March 27th, 2023 at 6:05 p.m. The Select Board, in their legal capacity as the town's Water and Sewer Commissioners, will hear the report and recommendations of the Town Rate Review Committee, take public comments, and consider approval and adoption of the fiscal year 2024 water and sewer rates. Zoom meeting ID is 897-9080-0793. And call-in number is 929-205-6099. For more information, please contact ATM at air.ma.us or 978-772-8220 extension 100. Date of the public hearing, Monday, March 27th, 2023. Time of the public hearing, 6:05 p.m. Location of the public hearing, remote participation meeting held on Zoom. See above for Zoom details. Meeting materials information may be obtained by contacting Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at ATM at air.ma.us or 978-772-8220 extension 100.
Okay, thank you. All right. So Dan, or wait a minute.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Are you presenting?
Yes,
or-
Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, so through you, I'll be presenting. Carly, do you want me to share screen or do you have the presentation?
I have it up. I can do it. No problem.
Okay. Yeah, so myself, Kimberly Abraham will also present, and Dave Fox is here from Ref Tellis Consulting, who helped us with our water model. So I'll begin.
Okay.
So we're gonna do slideshow mode.
It's on my other screen, but you can see it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Oh, okay. So
Sorry.
moving all around.
Can you make it bigger?
I have it as a full screen, is it not?
No,
No.
we're just in the PowerPoint program.
Just give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay.
That's better.
There we go. Okay, March 27th, 2023. This is the Water and Sewer Rate Hearing and a presentation for the Rate Review Committee's recommendation. Next slide. So we'll briefly discuss the committee members, the rate review process, a brief overview of our water and wastewater infrastructure and air, regulatory requirements. We'll also get into the water and sewer rate model used to develop the rates and the recommendation. So here is a list of the members of the Rate Review Committee. Select Board Member Janice Livingston is the chair. Rich Scotchless, Citizen Representative, Andrew Seeley, Finance Committee and Representative, as well as town staff, DPW Director, Water and Sewer Superintendent, Business Manager, DPW, Finance Manager, and Town Manager. So the goals of this meeting are to set the water rates and the sewer rates for fiscal year 24, which begins on July 1st of this year, and also to set the water and sewer connection fees for FY 24. So we'll get a little into, here's a background on the water and wastewater systems. Why don't I let Kimberly take over from here?
Sure, thank you. Good evening. So with the Ayer DPW water and wastewater, we provide drinking water and collect and treat wastewater for the citizens and businesses. DPW focuses on this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm not going to read the slides, but we do maintain the drinking water supply wells. We collect water throughout the town and treat that water before it's discharged to the Nashua River. Next slide, please. Focusing here on the water system, it was originally built in 1895. We have over 50 miles of pipe, 5 wells, 2 treatment plants, 2 water storage tanks. So there are some infrastructure issues when we have an old system. Maintaining and updating the old distribution system is essential to making regulatory standards and reducing service interruptions. Next slide, please. PFAS treatment costs are huge. The introduction of PFAS treatment has led to huge costs, as itemized in this slide. Now we have them installed and operating. However, the O&M, the operations and maintenance costs, are still being understood. Next slide, please. This is a picture of Grove Pond PFAS treatment plant that was built and operational in 2020. Next slide. And this is the Spectacle Pond PFAS treatment plant completed and operational in July of 2022. In both these plants, in both these plants, we are meeting PFAS standards and removing PFAS to non-detect and non-reportable levels. Next slide. Switching over to the air sewer system. Not quite as old, but it is still old. It was originally constructed in 1945. Some of the statistics are here, and we do have our sludge trucked away to Rhode Island, which is very costly. Again, an aging infrastructure and issues. We need to meet strict water quality standards and regulations. It's an old system that needs yearly investments to maintain it. We are wrapping up on phase 3 of 5 phases of upgrades to the wastewater treatment plants. Some of the improvements are listed here. Next slide, please. Dan, I'll send it back to you.
Okay. Yeah, so now I'll just get into a little bit of the budgets, the enterprise budgets for the water and sewer enterprise. So here's the graph table showing the actual budgets for fiscal year 22, the proposed and final budget for fiscal year 23, and the current proposed for fiscal year 24. And so these are basically our expenses. It also includes our debt. So this is what we need to create revenue to be able to implement through the water and sewer rates. So you can see in the totals here, it's about 2.42 million for the FY 2023 budget, and FY 2024 is a slight increase, 2.593. Next slide, Carly. So this is just a distribution of where the budget is broken down, and you can see a lot of it is in expenses and also in our debt with our capital improvements that are ongoing. I'll go to the next slide, Carly. In water division, our capital plan. So I won't go through this whole slide, but this is the current 5-year capital plan. And we go through the capital planning process to move forward with this. Some major items coming up here are the potential for the Spec Pond Well 3 pumping station, a new well over at Spec Pond, and also tank painting. So Go ahead, Carly, next one. Wastewater division budget. Next slide. Here is a breakdown of the FY22 actuals and then the FY23 budget and our currently proposed FY24 budget for wastewater. So similarly, 3.224 million for FY22 actual, and the budgets are slightly higher for FY23 and 24. Go ahead, Carly. And once again, a breakdown of the budget. There's a high percentage in debt and expenses. Go ahead, Carly. Similarly, the capital plan for wastewater, which gets taken into account as we develop the sewer rate. Some of the bigger items coming up are infiltration inflow repairs. That's along Sandy Pond Road, a very deep critical transmission or trunk line, excuse me. And also potential for garage storage facility in the future. Next, in the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. Next slide. So now I'm going to hand it off to Dave Fox, but kind of a little background is the town, by recommendation of the rate review committee, we contracted with Raftellus Consultants to update our rate review model. And it was last updated by a professional consultant in 2015. It's really a model that the town can use on its own, but it's been a while and we do have some new faces around. It made a lot of sense to update it. So Raftellus will be providing the town with training on the model for future use, and I'll hand it over to Dave for the next slide.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Fox. I'm the vice president with Raftellus, as Dan just mentioned. We were actually that consulting firm that provided the last update for you in 2015, and we're happy to be working with you all again. Carly, can you click just 3 more times for me? There's 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I meant to take the animation off here. Let me give just I'm going to try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. I know you have a long agenda. Going through what Kimberly and Dan just talked about, the operating budget, operating costs, both operation and maintenance expenses, as well as capital needs, new debt service to pay for capital, pay-go funded or cash funded capital on an annual basis, ensuring that the town is reinvesting in its water and sewer system. We take all these things into consideration. We have developed a long-term financial planning model, which, like Dan mentioned, is getting turned over to the town at the end of this engagement, or actually has already been turned over, and we'll finalize that and provide some training so the town staff can update that model on, as frequently as needed, at least on an annual basis, just to see how things are changing. We do a kind of a 5-year forecast, although the model goes out further than that. Or we focus on the 5 years. Actually, what we're going to show you is about a 10-year forecast, but focusing on those first 5 years, that's where things are the most clear. Things are changing very rapidly in the water and sewer industry with new regulations. Kimberly touched on this. PFAS, this is just hitting so many communities around the country, and unfortunately, the Commonwealth is no different. So what we're trying to do in this regard is to establish long-term financial sufficiency for both the water and sewer funds for the town by forecasting operating expenses, forecasting new debt service, cash funded capital, reinvestment in the infrastructure, compared to where your revenues are and where we think your revenues are going to go, with potentially some per capita reductions in consumption. And come up with what are the rate increases necessary to promote financial sufficiency as well as financial viability. And by that, I mean maintaining enough money in reserve funds so that you can potentially start planning for long-term capital improvements. So you don't need significant rate increases. We can kind of smooth in those rate increases over time, put some monies away into a reserve fund so that it can offset significant rate increases in the future that are required, again, to maintain that good, clean, safe service for customers all year long for both the water and sewer funds. Carly, if we go to the next slide, please. So we developed this all in a model and work with the town, work with Dan and Kimberly and other folks within the town to verify assumptions. But kind of just the key points here, we're assuming a 2% across the board rate increase for water. Within that, we're assuming that water consumption will decrease on an annual basis by about 1%. We're seeing this in Ayer, and we're seeing this really across the country as per capita consumption is declining annually, mostly due to high efficiency fixtures, things like that. And we're assuming that we're not going to, at least in a large portion on an annual basis, running a structural deficit, eat into those reserve funds. We're utilizing those reserve funds to offset future capital needs. On the sewer side, we're assuming a 5% increase across the board. And the same thing, sewer is also based on water consumption. We're assuming a 1% reduction in consumption. And the same thing, we're building up those reserve funds to utilize them in the out years for capital to mitigate rate increases in the out years, rather than utilize them on an annual basis to reduce rate increases. Both funds, what I'm about to show you, both funds are going to maintain healthy reserve fund balances, which is fantastic. One thing I will mention, that this financial plan, as we turn this model over to the town, should be updated at least annually. As I mentioned before, things are changing very rapidly. We want to ensure that as things are changing, we're factoring that into our financial plan and we're making adjustments accordingly. Go to the next slide, Carly, please. Just a couple things on reserve funds. So these reserve funds are healthy mechanisms to allow financial flexibility for both the water and the sewer funds. Everybody on this call should have a savings account, personal savings account or a household savings account. Water and sewer funds are no different. They can be utilized to offset emergency repairs that were not included in the capital improvements plan that Dan just went through. Things that pop up, new regulations. Things are changing rapidly in the PFAS world. The EPA just came out with new standards about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Things are still very up in the air where this is going, the amount of money you're going to have to reinvest into the system. And there's probably new things we didn't know about PFAS, and then all of a sudden it's here. There's going to be new things coming that we want to make sure we have enough in reserve funds so we can mitigate any sharp fluctuations in our revenue requirements or our costs on an annual basis. We can also utilize them on a case-by-case basis, but not every single year for purposes of reducing rate increases. We don't want to do that on every single year basis, because that would result in a structural deficit, and it's just a deficit that would go in perpetuity until those reserve fund balances were negated and completely gone. And we don't want that to happen. We want to keep those reserve fund balances high so we can utilize them to offset capital improvements in the future. One thing I'll mention is that within the Northeast region, water and sewer utilities have about 464 days of O&M. So well over a year of operating expenses sitting in a reserve fund. So even if you brought no revenue in, you would still be able to cover they would still be able to recover their operating expenses for about a year and a half. Next slide, Carly, please. So here's a 10-year forecast of the water cash flow. The columns here are your revenue requirements or your costs. The line going across is your existing revenue stream. So you can see a slight decrease because of that assumed 1% reduction. And what you'll see here is by the time we get out to 2026, 2027, without any rate increases, we start running that structural deficit that I talked about on an annual basis. And we don't want to allow that to happen. We want to maintain financial sufficiency annually. Go to the next slide. And that is apparent here, where you can see that reserve fund balance start dropping down, rapidly. It's still above that kind of minimum level of 365 days. But again, we're trying to keep these reserve fund balances up to offset future capital needs. We want to maintain where your reserve fund balance is today, rather than continue to drop it down and run that structural deficit. Go to the next slide. So what you can see here is this is with a 2% rate increase annually over the forecast period. You'll notice in like 2030 and 2031, there is an uptick in revenue requirements with some debt service hitting. And then that debt, some of it's falling off, or that existing debt service falling off in 2032. This is a perfect example of a 1 to 2 year period where it makes sense to utilize some of those reserve fund balances to not have it higher than 2% rate increase and increase rates on customers more than is necessary. And then, then the rates would drop back down. Customers are more open just having smaller, more programmatic increases on an annual basis rather than some fluctuations back and forth. So that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. If we go to the next slide. And you can see here with those 2% rate increases, above our kind of bare minimum that we would never want our reserve fund balance to come down to. But it's for the most part maintaining that balance on an annual basis, so we can ensure that we're going to offset the capital needs in the out years of our forecast. Next slide. Same thing here. I'm not going to go in much detail. Same exact story on the sewer side, although a little bit more pronounced in those out years. A significant deficit is going to be run if no rate increases. We go to the next slide. That is even more apparent. If we have no rate increases, the sewer fund balance would actually go negative by the 2029-2030 period, which we can certainly not allow. If we go to the next slide. So with those 5% rate increases, again, you can see a few years where we're offsetting slightly with that reserve fund balance to maintain some steadiness or predictability in our rates. But for the most part, having financial sufficiency on an annual basis with all our revenue requirements. We go to the next slide. And you can see there, for the most part, maintaining that reserve fund balance, getting a little bit lower there in 2033. That is 10 years from now. That gives me no heartburn at all. I don't think it's necessary to increase your residents' rates more so now in the short term to have a potential what if in 2033. We're too far away from that. There's too many things that are going to change. And that's why I recommend it, update this model on an annual basis and make changes as necessary. And with that being said, Dan, I think I'm turning it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I'll get into the proposed water and sewer rates. These were recommended by the Rate Review Committee after discussion. So go ahead, Carly. So based on the 2% and 5% rate increase Dave mentioned, the quarterly minimum proposed rates would adjust as noted here, which is a $10 rate going to $10.20 for water, and sewer would be $10 to $10.50. Next slide. So for proposed water rates, this is a stepped rate system. So for every 750 gallons is a per cubic foot there. We have step one would increase 6 cents, $3.01 to $3.07. And so on. Step two would increase 7 cents, step three by 9, and a conservation rate by 9 cents. Next slide, Carly. Proposed sewer rates, similarly, with the 5% increase, current is $8.78 to $9.22 for step one, and similar calculations for step 2 and 3 with the 5%. Okay, Carly. Oh, yeah, there we go. So if you look at this from the impact on an average Ayer resident, so this is based on a quarterly average of 1,000 cubic feet usage, you'd be talking for water based on the proposed FY24 rates, an increase of 60 cents or $2.40, 60 cents quarterly or $2.40 annually on their water bill. Similarly for sewer, the increase on a quarterly bill would be $4.40 or about $17.60 on an annual basis. Next slide, Carly. So the committee, the Rate Review Committee also looked at the water and sewer connection fees. And these are for new connections to the water and sewer system. And so it's basically a buying capacity or buying supply for water in the Ayer's water and sewer systems. So there's many factors that go into the calculation of how to make these fees, and it takes into account past and future costs of providing the capacity in our system, and also our capital improvement programs we are aware of coming up, especially the II for sewer. So re-looking at the calculation spreadsheet based on today's data, I should note the last time these fees were updated was 2021. We're in 2023. So today's data, the connection fee for water for the 1 inch, the 1.5 inch, and the 2 inch, it's recommended to move those from $4,500 per equivalent residential unit to $4,800 per ERU. And similarly for sewer, the connection fee per equivalent residential unit recommended to increase from $5,400 to $6,000 per ERU. Next. And this final slide is a summary of the recommendations of the Rate Review Committee. And I will leave it up here for now, while the board discusses. And that's.
Any questions, Scott?
No, I don't have any questions. Very well detailed presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Please raise your hand on there. Okay. Dennis? Oh, there you are, Dennis.
Yeah, I was
The
just wondering.
screen went bigger.
There you go. I had been reading about the EPA going to be setting some new enforceable limits, regulations regarding PFAS over the next couple of 3 months. So the question, do we know if the infrastructure that's been put in place in Ayer is likely to enable the town, or enable the town to meet those likely enforceable limits or not, or is it unknown?
So you mean, will we be able to keep up with the new changes?
Yeah, will it require, I know that there's been some recent upgrades in order to kind of deal with the PFAS issue. Are those upgrades sufficient is there a likelihood that those upgrades are sufficient to meet the new regulations that are going to be coming out in the next 2 or 3 months? Or do we know?
Dan or Kimberly? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so currently the infrastructure that's in place produces non-detect results, which is less than 2 parts per trillion with confidence. And the proposed EPA rates are 4 parts per trillion. So we are able to meet those proposed rates that EPA has out there. So yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? All right, I do not see that anybody else has any questions.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion then.
Okay,
I'll make a motion that the select board vote to increase water and sewer rates and connection fees as presented, with the water rates by 2% effective July 1st, 2023, sewer rates by 5% effective July 1st, 2023. $4,800 for ERU water services of 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and 2 inch, and $6,000 per ERU for sewer service effective July 1st, 2023.
okay, that was a mouthful. Seconded?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. So the new rates have been approved. Okay. Okay. Oh, there's Sean. Sean.
Hi, I'm here. Sorry, I'm late.
So, hey, Carly, could you quickly show that slide, the last slide for the recommendation for Sean?
Oh, I saw those. Okay.
I
didn't realize I was listed as iPhone. So.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, are you voting?
No, because I didn't watch the whole presentation. So, should I abstain or?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, let me just check. And okay, doesn't look like anybody has any questions. So
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing at 6:34 p.m.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Okay. All right. Next up, Dr. Adam Renda, Superintendent of the Ayer Shirley Regional School District.
Good
Welcome.
evening. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. Also with me tonight is Assistant Superintendent Charlie Caleri and Mr. Bill Plunkett, the Director of Finance. So we are here tonight, and we want to thank you for letting us come to talk about the statement of interest process through Mass State Building Authority, and really the process of a capital funding project, so a new school. There has been interest in both communities for a new elementary school. Page Hilltop in Ayer has been added on to, I believe, twice. At the beginning of its time, it was two separate schools, Hilltop School and Page. Believe the last major renovation was in 1980 when the addition that combined the two schools was put on. It's been a very good school for the town for a very long time, and it's still actually very functional and serving us well. But it is about at its time for usability, meaning we would probably be better off with a new building. So we are here tonight to see if the select board would be interested in the school district not only submitting a statement of interest, but would be able to tell us if they can financially support a project. So Carly, I don't know if you want me to share my screen or if you want to have that presentation up.
Yeah, what you had sent over last week is what you're using, I'm assuming.
Correct, yes.
Okay, yeah, I can pull it up for you, no problem.
Thank you.
Sure.
So because this is, we're talking about a proposed elementary school project, the funding for this would solely be on the town of Ayer. And if there happened to be a project in Shirley, that project would solely be on the taxpayers of Shirley. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the statement of interest is really the first step in asking MSBA, the Mass State Building Authority, for funding for a capital project, an addition, renovation, or any type of extensive repairs. The SOI asks districts what it believes the deficiencies in the school building are and how those deficiencies fit in within one or more of the statutory priorities established in MGL 70B. So a brief overview of how this project works. It's currently the window to submit a statement of interest is currently open. It will be open until April 14th at 11:59. The Commonwealth has irrevocably dedicated 1% of all sales tax. That's known as the School Modernization Trust Fund to the MSBA's capital programming. And the MSBA uses what's called the due diligence process. This is their process to review these submissions. So they review for completeness. They review for accompanying documents for the content. And at times they have a senior study visit where they will have senior members of MSBA come out to the site to verify some information. I've actually been part of this when I worked in Fitchburg for they're building a new Crocker Elementary School. They're very thorough, but it's very painless at the same time. After these three things happen, they recommend some of the statements of interest and some of the districts into what's called the eligibility period. Just as a side note here, I took this right from the MSBA website, so frequently asked questions. We can actually submit more than one SOI. But if we did that, we would have to prioritize one of those submissions. And MSBA does not want a district to submit a statement of interest unless the city or town can financially support that submission, which is really the main reason that we're here tonight. So in the content of the statement of interest, which we've already been writing, in fact, it's almost complete. Whether or not we submit that, we've been working on it since the deadline is coming up. It really informs the MSBA about the deficiencies that inhibit the district's delivery of our educational program. It's typically submitted by the superintendent. It does require a school committee vote for both regionals and non-regionals. And new this year, it requires the vote of a board of selectmen for non-regional. So this year, it's actually new that we don't need the vote of the select board, but we felt that if we were going to submit a statement of interest, we absolutely needed to bring this to the select board before doing so. So if we are lucky enough to be invited to the eligibility period, and just a side note here, it's not uncommon for districts to submit 2 or 3 times before they are invited into the eligibility period. But if we are invited into the eligibility period, it's 270 days long. There's an initial compliance for certification. We would have to form a building committee. There would be some maintenance of documents and an enrollment certification. And then we would need to authorize funding locally. And this would be for a feasibility study. I cannot tell you what that feasibility study would cost, but the feasibility study for Ayer Shirley Regional High School, I believe that was in 2011, was $750,000. What we've done is found 3 projects from our neighbors that are recently finished, so we could give you some idea about scope and cost of a project. Harvard and Groton recently have finished elementary schools. In North Middlesex recently, I believe it was a renovation of their high school. So Harvard, which is fairly close in size, I believe their elementary school is a little bit smaller than Page, and Groton's actually is a little bit bigger. But Harvard's elementary school was $53,600,000, and they had a reimbursement rate of 50.68%. Groton, which I believe is slightly larger, than about 550 students, and Page Hilltop is right around 540. Their project was at $78,600,000, and their reimbursement rate was 53.39%. In North Middlesex, a much larger school, regional high school. That project was $89 million, but they were reimbursed at 60.63%. I cannot tell you what our reimbursement rate would be. We would find that out during the eligibility period. We would probably fall somewhere in between these towns. So really, we're here tonight to kind of give you an overview of what that SOI project, submission would be, and asking if Ayer is financially able to support a new building project at this time, and then overall opinions of submitting a statement of interest. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, I'm opening it up to the board. Scott or Sean?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I do have to say I'm actually very excited to have the presentation. This is something that the select board has talked about in years past. I think we actually did take a formal vote before COVID to try to push the school committee into moving in this direction. You know, Page Hilltop has been a great school for years. My kids went through there, and the staff does a great job with the facilities, but it is definitely time to kind of move in the modernization of our all of our education facilities within the town of Ayer. So I'm very excited. In regards to the financial feasibility, we have been squirreling away as much money as possible into our capital stabilization to actually help offset the potential for a new elementary school. So that way, we can try and limit the impact to the taxpayers from other capital projects while this is being worked on and impacting the tax base.
That's great. That's good to hear.
I don't have any additional questions. I appreciate the presentation, and I agree with what Scott said. I think that we've been planning for it, and the town could financially stand.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I agree. I do think that you look at the price tag and after you fanned yourself a bit, I think we can handle it. And the thing is that the price wouldn't get any better. So if we were to wait, the price only goes up. So I think that it is a good idea to get the process rolling and get our letter of intent out there and then see what happens. As you said, we might not make it the first round, but maybe the second round. And meanwhile, as Scott pointed out, we'll squirrel away as much as we can. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't see.
Pauline has her hand up, Madam Chair.
Oh, there she is. Okay. As soon as I went back up, I saw you. Yes,
Thank
Pauline.
you, Jan. Good evening. One simple question. Is this an Ayer only elementary school or is it a regional elementary school?
Ayer only.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, going back up
I
and
don't-
down the, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm Michelle Granger on the school committee. I don't know how to do the hand. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make just a clarifying comment. I know that also on your agenda tonight is the senior center. And I just wanted to just ask the board if, I just reiterate that what you're telling the school committee is that you're ready now, even with another capital project on the horizon as a senior center. I just don't want to see two different demographics in town kind of be fighting for the same money. So I just, kind of want to hear that from you guys before we make a decision to move forward now.
Good point. Scott?
I think given the experience we had with the high school, we know that there's a little longer of a runway to get a school up and running and the impact on the tax base. And that is part of why we have been planning from a capital stabilization perspective. We know that, there was a little bit of a decline in our capital improvements during COVID as there was some uncertainty as to where the economy was going, et cetera. So we find ourselves in a good position, where we can manage two projects. The bigger one, being the school, as I said, is a longer runway. So it gives us a little more time to plan and accordingly with other projects that may come up around town outside of the senior center.
Great. Thank you. I just wanted to ask because, it is a big choice to make for everyone and it takes the commitment of the whole town.
No, it's a good question. All right, is there anybody else? And just to clarify, because I'm with Michelle Granger, how do you put up the little hand? Okay, because I've never been able to find the little hand myself. That's why I usually end up waving. But how do you find the little hand on this Zoom?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
If on the bottom of your screen, you're going to have a button that says reactions.
Uh-huh.
If you click on reactions, the hand is an option.
Thank you.
I'm a teacher.
I never clicked reactions before because I was like, well, that's not what I want to do. So, okay. Thank you. All right. And
So I guess, sorry, quick follow-up question. So would it be helpful, or I guess, what can the board do to help support this process as you go into the statement of intent?
Well, really what I heard tonight is what we needed to feel confident in submitting this SOI. You could always take a non-binding vote. There will be a time after we submit, if we're invited to the eligibility period, where we would come back and present to you much more specifics about funding and money to take an actual binding vote. But really, I don't think we really need anything else from you other than what I've already said.
Thank you.
well, that sounds reasonable. Okay. All right, just cruising through. All right. Okay, doesn't look like anybody else has any questions. So that sounds like a good recommendation as far as a non-binding vote at this moment.
I'll make a motion that for the Ayer Select Board to support a statement of intent for a new elementary school in the town of Ayer.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Okay, that's been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It'll be on our April 4th agenda.
All right, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Mark Archibald, Town Planner.
Hello, Madam Chair.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Apparently you can hear me well.
Yes.
What I am seeking from the Select Board tonight is a letter of support for what's known as a District Local Technical Assistance Grant, which is forthcoming from the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission to assist the town in an infrastructure capacity study for the form-based code districts, where we believe we could, see fairly significant growth over the next few decades. So this will be looking at water, sewer, and wastewater demand and capacity as a result of new apartments and new commercial space within both the downtown Park Street form-based code district as well as the West Air Village. And I'm sure that as we see projects being proposed in these districts, the question of capacity to serve them will come up. And I see this grant as a first step in identifying those issues. So, it's a fairly simple thing. It's not really an engineering level study, but it will give us sort of a broad view of capacity and demand issues that can be explored further if needed. And
So you're asking for the board to just provide you a letter saying that we too want this looked into or for this
Yes.
grant? Okay.
yeah, yes. It's I've already drafted a letter, and in fact, we were notified that we were awarded the grant. So it's really a formality that the rules say we have to get give a briefing to the select board and obtain a letter of support.
But you already have the grant?
Yes, but we
Oh,
still need
okay.
the letter of support.
Okay, no, I'm just making sure. I just
Yes, yes.
following what you said. Okay,
Right, yep.
all right. And I'm opening it to the board. Any questions?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Or especially, I certainly support since we already got the grant.
Yes, no questions.
Okay, all right then. We have a motion?
There is a hand up.
Oh, wait a minute. Where? Oh, yes.
Yes, there was a handout of the application. And I'm not sure if there was a handout of the letter of support as well.
I did not see a handout for the letter of support for us. I saw
Okay.
we got sent the copy from the town manager did. I also see Jeff has his hand up, Jeff Tillotson.
You're on mute, Jeff.
We can't hear you, Jeff.
I have to click 2 buttons, not just one. Sorry. I'm the lucky representative from the planning board to the MRPC, and I'd just like to let you know that this DLTA grant proposal was approved unanimously. And not only that, but the MRPC comment was made by somebody else that Ayer is on the cutting edge of doing this. And they're pretty excited about this work getting done. So I appreciate the select board's support of the request.
Okay. All right, I don't see anybody else. Okay,
I'll make a motion that the Ayer Select Board provide Mark Archibald, the town planner, with a letter of support for the district local technical assistant program grant.
Second.
okay, all those in favor, Scott,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. Congratulations on getting the letter of support for the grant you got.
Thank you very much.
No, this is great. This is great that you've already got the grant and everything. That's wonderful. We're very lucky that we do very well when this town applies for grants. So thank you very much. Okay. All right. Okay. So next up is going to be the site recommendation for the Center for Active Living. So here's how it's going to do. We're going to hear the presentation first. Okay. Once the presentation is happened, I will then open it up to the board for questions. Then I will open it up to the public. So I will ask everyone to use the little hand and everyone to stay mute until called on. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's do the let's see the proposal or the recommendation or whatever.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
members of the select board, I'll start off just to frame the study and what we're asking of the board tonight. And then through you, Madam Chair, I know that Katie Petrozzi, the director of the Senior Center, has a brief some brief remarks, as does Jeff Thomas from the Parks Department. So in your packet is the recommendation study report of the Senior Center Site Selection Working Group. And Madam Chair, if we could just sort of frame how we got to this point briefly for everybody's benefit. In 2018, with the support of town meeting, it was determined that there was a need for a senior center and that there should be a feasibility study to find a site for the senior center. That was approved by town meeting with funding in 2018. And that feasibility study was conducted and culminated in October of 2020 at the fall town meeting. The final recommendation of that feasibility study at the time was a portion of land on West Main Street. At the town meeting, there were a lot of concerns raised about the environmental history of that site. There were some other concerns just raised in general. Keep in mind, it was at the height of the pandemic as well. And town meeting voted to table that proposal at the time. Rather than have the issue of finding a site languish, as the board knows in consultation with you, I put together a site selection working group consisting of my office, Dr. Katie Petrossi, the director of the Senior Center, Dennis Curran, the COA board president, Jeff Thomas, Parks Director, Jason Mayo, Air Parks Commission, the DPW Director, Ken Diskin from the Planning Board, Alan Minoyan, and Alicia Hersey from Housing and Economic Development. And what this working group did for the last over 18 months, which culminates into tonight, is we first looked back at all of the sites in the original feasibility recommendation, including the West Main Street site. And we also did this with some consulting services from Abacus Architects and Planners. And as you know, and as you've seen in the report, the fundamental challenge we face is there are no vacant municipal buildings in Ayer that could house a senior center. We don't have any town-owned buildings, and we don't have any viable town-owned land. And I want to stress viable because this project needs between 1.5 and 2 acres to be constructed. And when we say viable, as we saw with the West Main Street site, you know, environmental considerations, wetlands, so forth. So after 18 months, we looked at all the original sites in the report, including the recommendation of West Main Street. We expanded that to over 20 different sites in Ayer, as well as multiple sites in Devens. We also issued a town-wide and statewide request for proposals looking for a site, and only received one response from a non-viable site on Devens. The working group even looked a lot at Devens locations as well. Finding the site, and that's all we were looking is for a site recommendation for this project, proved to be a true challenge. To conclude, as we were moving through this process, conversation, an idea, an opportunity presented itself between the COA and the Parks Commission about potentially locating a senior center, community center project on a portion, and we'll show that in just a minute, on a portion of Peroni Park, with the understanding from the Parks Commission that a component of that would be an indoor gym, which would be of mutual benefit and interest to the parks and to the COA. And this site presented itself as a unique opportunity. The advantages to the site is it is the appropriate size for the project. Carly, could you pull up the... So when looking at the site, it affords the appropriate size for the project, including parking. The site is town-owned, and therefore no project costs for purchasing the site. The site is adjacent to the existing senior center and senior housing at 18 Pond Street. The site is accessible with a high level of walkability for seniors in the adjacent neighborhoods. It's centrally located in Ayer. It provides the opportunity to further develop unique recreation programs for seniors and parks. It provides the opportunity for an indoor gym, which has a multi-purpose for both interests. It provides an appropriate level of parking, and it is a unique opportunity. And so I don't, on this, in the site selection group wants to stress, this is just an approximate location that's recommended for that project. It is not an exact. In fact, we'll argue that the red box is a little bit larger. Before I turn it over to Katie through you, the Parks Commission is in support of this as long as the indoor gym component on this site. And I know that the COA board is also in support. So we're here tonight for two things I just want to stress. One is your further support as the select board should we continue to pursue this site. And in full disclosure, there is no other site. We spent the last 18 months. And so when people at this point, there is no plan B. And I'm not saying that to hedge this in a corner. It's the fact that if we were to pursue this site, so we're looking for your input and support. If we're to pursue this site, then the second step would be that the select board would vote to authorize the formation of an official building committee for the project. The official building committee would be subject to the open meeting law and the public records law. All of the meetings would be public and would have a public component. And if you look at page 7 in the recommendation report, it is the building committee that will oversee the conceptual plan development, including the extensive public outreach and participation. So I think it's important to note that this is not designed at this point. Identify and secure funding, oversee the final design, secure the funding, oversee the project, conduct all of the meetings. So the first task and the only task that this working group had was to find a potential site for consideration. And that proposal is the site at Peroni Park. And if we were to proceed, the next step would be the formation of a building committee. There would be extensive public input. This would also ultimately need to go to town meeting for funding and so forth. So this is really the first step. And so with that, Madam Chair, in the interest of time, through you, I'd turn it over to Katie Petrossi and then Jeff Thomas to sort of speak to the proposed site from their respective expertise.
Okay. Katie?
Great, thank you. So as the feasibility study has noted, and for anyone who's been down in the senior center, the existing senior center does not meet the needs of Ayer seniors. It is difficult to find, tucked back in the walkout basement of the Ayer Housing Authority. We don't have enough parking. In fact, we had to do a lot of shifting of cars today in order to fit everyone in for the activities. And even once you find it, it has an unwelcoming entrance. It's not inviting to come in. Once you're inside, we just have 2 rooms. In fact, there's one room that we rent and one room that we use at the pleasure of the Ayer Housing Authority. And it's just not enough space, 2 rooms, to meet the diverse needs of the seniors of Ayer. What it means to program for a 60-something senior is very different than an 80-something senior, and so, or a 90-year-old senior. And so we just need more space in order to provide the quantity and diversity of programming to meet the seniors' needs. This existing senior center doesn't have a commercial kitchen. It's something that we have tried to work on, but there was not a feasible solution for that. Not having a commercial kitchen means that we cannot prepare or cook any of our own food here at the senior center. So we need to bring in outside catered food. And that's obviously not economically viable or advantageous in the long run. The open kitchen plan is quite noisy and gets in the way of conversation during the mealtime. The building itself, the parking lot is not ADA compliant. The threshold is not ADA compliant. The bathrooms, the walkways, we are not ADA compliant down here. The low ceilings and lack of windows that are, just inherent to a walkout basement don't create the kind of warm and welcoming atmosphere that we want to create, where people can come in and linger and participate in multiple activities. It's also not ideal for staff. We don't have the right kinds of spaces in order to collaborate together to work efficiently. And although I have my background blurred, the ceilings of my office are not structural, so they don't go all the way up to the ceiling, which means that you cannot have a private or confidential conversation about financial matters, mental health issues of any kind, and that is a risk for deterring seniors to come get the kind of help and services that they need. So we, as the COA director, I believe that a partnership with Parks and Rec at Peroni Park is a wonderful opportunity, a solution to all of those inadequacies of our current space. It allows us to design a right-sized building with the variety and quantity of spaces that we need to provide diverse programming for seniors. It would provide us with a large meeting space that we don't have right now. It would be convenient to the seniors that are currently living at Pond Street, as they are accustomed to being able to walk to the senior center. And so that would certainly be convenient for them. We would design it with ample parking, which is one of the issues for us right now. And a partnership with Parks and Rec affords us the opportunity to get facilities or features that we would not be able to get with a standalone senior center. For example, a full gymnasium would hold 2 pickleball courts, which would allow us to have a year-round pickleball league indoors, which is so popular with seniors right now. If we were to do one of those suspended walking tracks around the top of the gymnasium, that would allow an opportunity for residents of Ayer to walk indoors when the weather is cold outside, and in the summer when it's hot and humid, and especially for people with respiratory issues, it's also uncomfortable that time of year to walk outdoors. So I also feel that the schedules of a senior center and Parks and Rec operation are very complementary. So senior centers are typically most active between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., whereas, as Jeff can speak to in a few minutes, the schedules, after school schedules of children and families is after we're done for the day. So that allows us to share a building with the kind of separateness that we would like to have from time to time, but also gives us good opportunities to collaborate when that's desired as well. So all in all, I think this is a really wonderful opportunity. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Jeff, or through you, Madam Chair.
Yep. So Jeff? Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you all for hearing us discuss this. I'm also accompanied from the Parks Commission by Chairman Jason Mayo and member Kevin Melantic, who are both been looking at this project closely. For those not familiar with Parks activities and Parks Department activities, this is something that has been discussed since at least 1998. We even have some plans that were drawn up at that time to do a community center down near the basketball courts. So this has been a goal for a very long time. And when we were approached by Dr. Pedrazi on this about 6 months ago to discuss potential of corroborating with this, we were very excited. So at least look into the potential for it. For the Parks Department, the key is, as has been mentioned a couple of times, a full-size gym. And we do utilize school gyms for a lot of the activities we do, but they don't nearly fulfill what we require for many of the programs we do. And more importantly, a lot of the programs we'd like to create. So we've been very limited over the years with that. When you think about activities for children and adults and seniors, we're very limited in our current environment to pretty much 6 or 7 months of the year, and everything else we're indoors. So we really need more indoor space to do things like that. We've been very appreciative of the school, and Ms. Granger's here from the school board, so she knows my gratitude and our gratitude from our department for what the school's been able to provide us. But again, it's just there's just not enough space. So this is something that would be an incredible benefit to the community for all that it could do. We speculate that if this was something we could do, this building would be used every day. And that's not an exaggeration. Every day, this gym portion of this building would be used all the time. Now, the concerns we had were at the location that's being considered, we call that Field 6. To take a section of that would be to remove that infield part of it and no longer be able to host what are referred to as 90-foot diamond full-size baseball games. There'd still be quite a bit of the field remaining that could be used for other activities that we currently use it mostly for, such as T-ball and then just general activities like touch football and kite flying, things like that. And there will be space based on the plans that I've heard and the Parks Commission would insist on to still keep that amount of space for it. But the displacement of the 15 to 20 games of baseball played at that level compared to the hundreds of games that are played at the other levels, that is a concern. And we feel that there is a viable means to place those games in other fields that are available at the high school or at the Shirley Laura White field, or even at the middle school, if that field could be developed a little further. That's something that the commission would want to make sure was taken care of before moving forward. But I'm confident that that definitely could be done. The other concerns that the commission had and I've had include having the abutters, making sure that this is something that they're comfortable with instead of just, putting this brand new thing right in their backyard, making sure that they're comfortable with that. And then, of course, parking, if there's congestion with the extra activities that come in, that has to be worked out. But obviously, that's what a working group that is put together would then work toward. So we're supporting of this at the Parks Department and look forward to trying to see what else we can do to move forward with it.
Okay, thank you very much. So if I'm looking at this right, as soon as I come down the street to go, that immediate entrance in Peroni Park is where you're looking at putting the senior center, right? Hello, yes, Jeff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, so it's School Street is the entrance that heads in toward the park, so that would still be the same area. But as far as where the parking is going to be, I don't believe that concept's been entirely explored yet. If it's going to be down toward, if you took right onto Bly Street and went down to the more gravelly dirt area down below, if that's where a lot of the parking would be, which is what I would suggest, that's where a lot of it would be. I don't know if the plans have been drawn out for where that would be exactly.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to open it up to the board.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, no, I don't have any additional questions. I appreciate the presentation. It was very thorough.
Thank you, Sean.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I know you're going to address the parking. That was one of my questions looking at this location. The other question I have, and I know nothing's set in stone, is looking at the area that's outlined in the packet. It includes an area of a building that was recently constructed for the Parks Department. Is that going to be impacted by this project?
If I may speak on that, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I'm not sure if you're seeing the same thing that I've seen on that, but the plan was definitely not to have any impact on that new building at all.
Okay, thank you.
The concern is that from the park's perspective is the old building that is still up and used for storage. One of the prerequisites of the Parks Department would be we'd have to have created a new building for storage, probably in the lower area by the basketball courts, probably next to it, because we would need another storage building for that, but that would be relatively small compared to the rest of the project.
Okay.
Just thinking from a capital planning perspective, would it be prudent to try to include that with the overall project then? Just something to think about as you kind of explore, pulling everything together.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right. So I just want to throw out there too, that whatever happens, we should sell a brick. something like that we've talked about before, is even with Kitty Park. For people to be able to, like, it was done with the bank and everything, which also can bring funds and also have somebody to put, like, in memory of or something like that. So I'm just going to throw that out there. So, all right.
I'll do a quick response to that, and then somebody else can weigh in as well. I obviously, we've talked before on this, Janice, and I firmly believe in that for two reasons. Obviously for the fundraising part of it, but also the inclusivity that you get from the people that do that and now feel part of the project as well. So that's absolutely, I think everyone would agree with that.
Right. Okay. So we had some people at the beginning of the meeting who said that they wanted to speak. So if they could raise their hands so that I can call them. Michael Hamill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Hamill, 17 School Street, directly across the street from Florney Park, right by the entrance to the corner. As far as the neighborhood goes, we are not in favor whatsoever of this site plan. We think it's kind of an absurd place to put it. To get away, in 1907, Florney Park was donated to the town of Ayer. It was donated for outdoor recreational use. We are 9.9 square miles. We are land poor. This town is, we're old Groton Junction. That's what it is. We have no space and we keep building upon it. There's 57 acres of land that the town owns for where the high school is. Now, I heard a comment made by an administrator from town saying that the school administration was approached for that land. Well, and they were told, no, you can't, because they want to use it for future site development. Well, they don't have the right to say no, because the town of Ayer owns that land. It's right in the tax documents in the town. So the 57 acres of land that can be utilized at the high school, most certainly can. The lower field across the street from the dump can be used. You divide it up, 20 acres for the park and rec. And they can get their 2 acres there, but if anybody knows how much 2 acres of land is, it's quite a bit. You're taking away from the only park in the town of Ayer and putting up permanent structures and a permanent parking lot. And taking away from regular field use. Not alone, even though there's only 15, 20 games played there a year on baseball, 90-foot diamond, now you have to find a place. Now we don't have a 90-foot diamond that the town owns. You have a 90-foot diamond that the regional school district owns. In closing, I recommend that the board just seriously looks and thinks about this decision before they go any further with it. I am completely for a senior center. There most certainly needs to be an upgrade. I've been in the one up the top of the hill. It is not adequate for what they need. But this location is absurd. It's meant for open space. It's not meant to put 2 buildings on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ellen?
Good.
You're on mute, Ellen. Ellen, we can't hear you.
Okay, Ellen Fitzpatrick. I used the senior center a great deal before COVID, exercise classes, events, and things like that. And I was part of the group that attended the early planning phases when we were talking. There was a huge meeting at the high school about what we wanted in the senior center. And it was very well attended. It was a great start. Unfortunately, we got off track because of COVID. And there's been a big lull. I have heard this presentation because I talked to Katie with some other people. I love the idea, frankly. You do have to consider what the neighbors think. But it sounded from what we were told that there were only a few groups that were using that baseball field and that there were other options where they could go. whereas there weren't other options of where we could place the senior center. I love the idea of the indoor gym, not only for the kids and for the town to have that as a resource, but the idea of the elevated walking area would be wonderful for seniors. The pickleball courts, because there's people who are just pickleball crazy among seniors right now. But we definitely would need parking. But I think it's also good, I think, that idea that there would be opportunities when the seniors would come in contact with the young people and things like that. I think that's actually a great idea, intergenerational contact. And I know Katie has worked at a facility, a senior center that was part library. And I would very much like to see the senior center be a community gathering place where we would do a number of community events and things. So I'm very, very much in favor of this plan. I hope we can work something out and appease the neighbors. I think it's centrally located. I just want to make sure that something happens. We've been waiting a very long time. Many of us are very old and we'd like to get this done sometimes while we're still around to enjoy it. But anyway, I just wanted to express my support.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Lori Nearing?
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, so I join what Ellen just said in being in favor of the concept of combining youth and seniors in an intergenerational situation. And we do need this facility. My question has to do with the location as well. I think the current understanding and thoughts that have been presented may reflect today's view of how often that field is used, but it seems to me that this should be a town-wide vote brought before a town meeting and not decided by just a few people who are obviously deeply involved in what is needed currently. But I strongly support what Michael Hamill was saying, in that we have such little open space in Ayer. This is not only going to interfere, take away permanently from some of that open space, but we also won't have views of Peroni Park and the ball field, excuse me, and Grove Pond, which is, a lovely view shed. I wasn't aware of the 57 acres of land at the schools. Ideally, I'd like to protect it all. But I'm just wondering if we're starting to talk about Page Hilltop needing to be replaced. Can there be some combined structure where we look more comprehensively at all these buildings and needs being taken care of and look more closely at the open space that are surrounding the fields? So my main concern is that, to me at least, and I don't know what the legal requirements are, but this is a really important decision tree for our town to make with a long-term effect, long-term impact. And we may be able to look at, I know there's controversies with using Devon's, but we've been talking about that for a while, and other properties, that it should be decided on by the town, not by just a handful of people. Thank you.
Well, the town would be, as presented earlier, the town would be a part of the vote. So, okay, but thank you. Thank you. So, okay, Ken? Oh, what? Oh,
clarification. I missed the beginning of the meeting. I apologize. Would money be spent designing this before town vote, or would town vote be required before we would even spend money on a plan?
Robert?
Madam Chair, so with respect to that question, this would be the first step. In other words, the site selection group is just recommending this site to be further explored.
Okay.
If the select board give that the green light, we're asking them to form a formal building committee that will be charged, it's on page 7 of the report, with a whole bunch of things, including developing the conceptual development, with public outreach, funding, going to town meeting. This project is going to have to go to town meeting. There is no existing funding at this point. The next step would be for the building committee, has a lot of work to do if we were to move forward. But in order to present something at town meeting, like what was done in 2020, a lot of work has to be done. If it is the will not to pursue with this site, I can say to you that at this time, there is no plan B, respectfully. The land that's talked about at the schools, and in the interest of time, that has been looked in. We have spent over 18 months looking at sites, including Devon's, and there are some inherent barriers to sites on Devon's. And one of them is to ask taxpayers of Ayer to invest millions of dollars in a location that isn't even in the town. And there's a whole myriad of issues, but we're at a point that we felt we would come to the select board with this recommendation as a potential opportunity.
So Robert, so basically, in order, if the idea of Devon's was looked into, we would have to purchase the land that historically we owned, and that mass development is assuming that we would someday get back. Is that correct? Because that's been told to me.
Yeah, we spent over 2 years looking at Devon sites. The problem with Devon sites is we would have to buy them. They're not going to give us any land. Number two, we would have no direct jurisdiction over the land at this time. Third is the sites we looked at were considerably further away from the proximity of town, taking into transportation and so forth. And frankly, I've said it publicly before, and I'll say it publicly here. It has been extremely frustratingly difficult, on the verge of impossible, dealing with the bureaucratic red tape of mass development.
I agree with that. So, okay, thank you. So, Ken?
Yeah, I was about to say some of the things that Robert just said ahead of me. Thank you, Robert. But I did want to mention one thing. I was asked to join this site selection working group, a year and a half or 2 years ago. And I'll be honest with you, when I thought I had some experience with the land in town, being on the planning board, and having looked at a lot of parcels in town, and environmental issues that are faced by town, wetlands issues that are faced by town, ledge problems that are faced by the town. And I figured it would take maybe 3 months, to get that resolved and find a site. Much to my surprise and amazement, after meeting on a monthly basis, sometimes every 2 weeks, it took that year and a half that Mr. Pompian talked about to form an opinion. And the only way we got to that opinion was with a joint agreement, with the Park and Rec on that site. We looked at land, I'd hate to rattle it off, but the report you have shows you the 20-odd pieces of land. Some we looked at, we couldn't even divulge privately because they're owned by private citizens. And, there's a procedure for that you cannot divulge publicly. Yet we researched, called members of the group, called individual people, went out and looked at land and met. And we continually found obstacles, as is typical with most property in Ayer, that involved either wetlands, the site location had environmental potential problems, wasn't in the right location of town. So I think the site selection working group ended up with a very cooperative effort at the end to finally resolve and get a location in town that complied with the requirements we were asked to achieve in the first place, which was a somewhat central location, a place that would be accessible to the senior community, and get a good working relationship with Parks and Rec. So at the end of the day, I don't believe there is any site in the town of Ayer, my own personal opinion, that is not going to be without shortcomings. They all have shortcomings, and we see that with development all over town. So the hope is that, I believe I'm speaking for myself, who was on that site selection group, that the hope was that we would come to an agreement on a site that would be our best effort to bring to the Board of Selectmen. And that's what the effort led to after an extensive amount of meetings and discussions and phone calls and the other work that was put in by the volunteer groups and the professionals at Town Hall. So that's my little piece on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Air Senior Center.
Sorry, hold on just a second.
Oops.
My name is Bob Gardner, and I'm 74 years of age, and I participate down at the senior center almost daily. And I certainly respect Laurie Nearing and Michael Hamill. The points they've raised are good points, but I certainly would suggest, there's a lot of us that are getting older and older and older, and time marches on. I hate to admit that, but I just retired 4.5 years ago from the state, and time does march on. And I would respectfully suggest that the selectmen adopt the proposal by Jeff Thomas and Katie Pedrazi, two people that work very hard on this project, and I'm in favor of it. And I'm currently down here at the senior center. The parking is abominable. The space is abominable. And there's really not much effort, it's gone into the proposal that's wasted. And I would respectfully ask the selectmen to go forward with it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Pauline's iPad.
Good evening again, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. I'll be very quick for me. My dear friend Bob Gardner and my dear friend Mike Hamill have opposing views. I lean more on the side of Mike Hamill's. The question I have for the site committee, not necessarily the board, did the site committee actually look at the deed for Peroni Park? And I don't expect an answer right now. I would like to see this in the future. But I believe that the deed speaks specifically to the uses of Peroni Park. And as Michael said, it's not putting buildings on open space. It was deeded for recreation. I have read the deed, so I'll just leave that there. The other question I have is, could not the location be moved on the other side of the parking lot so the Babe Ruth field remains intact? I don't expect an answer to that, just a thought. Last question. Where does one find the meeting minutes for the site review committee, or I'm sorry, not to name it correctly, but I would expect that the group that met for the last 18 months kept minutes of their meetings, decisions of their votes of their decisions, and those are public records, or am I wrong?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Respectfully, it was not a committee. It was a working group. It did not consist of a quorum of any public body. It did not subject to the open meeting law. And it was looked to just vet all of the information. There were no votes and what have you. So there were not formal minutes and so forth. If the board decides to proceed and form a formal building committee, then it would be subject to the open meeting law.
Thank you, Mr. Pumperyan. Follow-up question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So we residents who might or might not see this are being told there is absolutely no record of any of the discussions of the site committee.
Point of order. I didn't say that. It is
Okay.
not subject to the open meeting law.
I understand.
And you have the report in the packet. And the packet references the RFP that was done, as well as the feasibility study.
But there are no records of the discussions of the site committee.
As it wouldn't be of any working group.
All right, thank you.
All right, Ken?
We did bring up the question of the deed. I remember bringing that up myself a while back. Was that researched, Robert? I believe it was.
Yes, with town council to be reviewed. And I mean, that's a whole nother
discussion.
Discussion. I guess the takeaway is at this point, in order to come to town meeting with a project and a proposal, an enormous amount of work has to be done. And a lot of that hasn't been done. The task was simply, town meeting tabled it on October of 2020. And frankly, it would have just sat there and languished. There was no direction from town meeting or for anybody. It would have just gone on the shelf and nothing would have happened. I put together an internal working group to review the report, to look at everything. We did an RFP that was posted statewide, publicly through everything. We got one response in Devens. We looked at over 20 sites in Devens, and there was an enormous amount of issues. An enormous amount of work went in by the working group, and we're presenting this opportunity. If the town doesn't want to proceed with this, in other words, the next step, which is outlined on page 7, now this is a proposed recommended site, then the building committee in the public venue, including all the public outreach and so forth, minutes, you have it, does its due diligence. It's a huge undertaking. We're proposing a 9-member committee that consists of 3 residents. There's an enormous amount of work to be done. If not to proceed, we've talked about this at length, there is not a plan B at this time.
So, couple questions. So I too have kind of wondered about the other side of the park. I call it the grassy area where we used to do the tug of wars as a kid. Have we looked at that side of the park? Or is it only that one spot in the park?
Madam Chair, I can talk to that.
Yes.
That if we put it on that side of the park, it would destroy a lot of our programs. We have all of our soccer programs in the fall and the spring there. We have Field 2 softball there that gets used almost every night during the baseball season. The Field 6, the big diamond that we chose, or I don't want to say chose, but we're steering toward, it's very limited use. Like Jeff said earlier, 15 to 20 games a year and diminishing. We have a brand new baseball field at the high school that we can move there. It's not even an appropriate diamond for older kids, really, because the left field is so short. So cutting out that diamond in that area, we're not really losing any. It's a single-use field, right? All you can do on that field is play baseball, and at that level, right? So it's cutting down a lot of. We're not really losing much. We're gaining a lot more in terms of being able to add programs from basketball and other programs that we can offer in the interior space. We're losing a little bit of grass from the left field, outfield, really, but we're still retaining all of that grass in the center field and right field areas of Field 6, if anybody understands what a baseball diamond looks like. So it's out of the question to put it on that side of the park. The only place in that park is where it's going to fit is right there.
Okay, thank you. Robert, I have one more question. So it was brought up earlier about all this acreage up at the school and whether or not they can say yay or nay. Could you address that, please?
Well, first of all, without seeing the exact land, it's unclear, but the land belongs to the town of Ayer. The school, depending on what the land is, leases it from the town, but I'm not sure exactly what land and if that land would be viable for the project.
Okay. Okay. All right, Lori?
You. Let's see, a couple of questions. Mr. Mayo, thank you for clarifying that. That was really helpful. I wondered if you had also looked at making a smaller footprint of a building at the site at Prony Park, so it's not taking up the field. I appreciate your perspective that right now that space is not well used, but we're looking at in perpetuity for the future. You know, things could change, needs could change, the town is growing. I hate to see open space gobbled up like that when we have so little open space for our kids. So that was one question. I'm really curious now about the areas around the schools as well. But I also wanted to revisit Devon's as a possibility. Robert, I appreciate that you and the whole committee has worked really hard on these issues. That being said, without having an opportunity to review what you have apparently already reviewed because minutes have not been kept, I wonder if we have pursued things like a joint senior center or use, whatever we're calling living center with Devon's, because there is a growing population of older people there. And surely it's right in the middle of it. I would contest the fact that it's too far remote. Ayer is 3 miles long. What is that, 1.5 miles from Peroni Park? That's not an issue in my mind. Of course, depending on where on Devon's, but I'm picturing kind of close to the Verbeck Gate or maybe close to the Barnum Gate. And there was a time when my understanding is that the Army offered free land back to the towns. That time is long since gone, but it seems to me that we could put pressure on mass development and the Army to get land back without a charge or with a low charge, because Shirley got land for their municipal buildings and it has been unequitable all along in what Ayer is getting back.
So Shirley had to have a super town meeting though. So to build the senior, little senior village, that was a super town meeting. And whatever, and the only thing I'm going to add about Devon's is that whatever we do, as had been discussed at the symposium, could affect the future plan of getting all that back, because that may take up that little piece that we were going to negotiate with maybe Harvard or Shirley to take up. So those are things that are concerned. But the other problem is that, as brought up too, is we would have to abide by everything that mass development said. We would have no control. That is concerning. So
I wonder if we pushed through legislation, though, we pushed our legislative representatives, if they would be supportive, considering how Ayer has been burdened with so many other issues.
Well, the only way we can get this report to the state is that all the towns have to agree. So that's part was also discussed at the symposium, is to send that report to get the state to and the Senate to say, okay, you can have all this back, or however it works out. All 3 towns have to agree. So that report goes in all the same. So I agree with, putting pressure on the Army, for definitely put some pressure on the Army for cleanup. We know that, and we know how that's gone. So, just remember it's the Army. Okay, Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'd kind of like to piggyback a little bit on what Ellen Fitzpatrick mentioned, and also Jeff. We started with the site selection working group started with the idea of trying to place a standalone senior center somewhere in town. I mean, that was the initial brief that we were given, and we worked diligently for well over a year, I think, trying to find a standalone senior center spot. Jeff mentioned that it has been their desire, Parks and Recreation, for 22 years to have an indoor gym, or to be able to expand to the indoors Parks and Recreational programming. And to Ellen's point, that time is growing short. I do not think it is reasonable. I think that the opportunities that this presents to the town outweigh the fact that we are taking some of what is admittedly valuable open space for the greater good. It will also, I think, allow vastly expanding not only Parks and Rec programming, but also the senior center programming. if we don't have this joint community center, kind of an intergenerational facility, then we will be left with the idea of Parks and Rec going on their own way to find a spot to put their much wanted gymnasium, and the senior center going their own way, trying to find adequate spot for a standalone senior center. I do not think, and I know Robert spent considerable amount of time researching this, I do not think, and just my kind of casual observation of how mass development has cooperated or not with the town, I do not think that Devon's is a likely possibility in any reasonable time frame. I tend to doubt whether the Department of Defense is going to be willing to go out of their way to kind of work cooperatively to give us some of that land. I don't think regionalizing and bringing Shirley and or the residents at Devon's into the conversation, what that will tend to end up doing is decreasing Ayer's ability to control the process and decreasing our ability to attend to the needs of the people who live here and pay taxes here. We will be subject to the control of others outside the town, and those others have significant political and economic weight that it will be extremely difficult for Ayer to overcome. So I think right now we're at a point where proceeding, and again, this was not an exclusionary process. Right now we are coming to the citizens of the town, and I know I've spoken with Mike on a couple of occasions about this. We are coming to the town with a proposal asking them to consider this site for the intergenerational facility. And those meetings, as Robert mentioned, will be open to the public. The building committee will be subject to the open meeting law, and people can bring their specific concerns about precise location, size of parking, indoor facilities to those meetings, and I'm sure that they will be taken to heart and acted on. So I would ask that the board kind of move this process forward to the next steps as outlined by the town manager.
Thank you, Dennis. Ellen? You're mute.
Sorry, I'm terrible with.
You're just
electronics.
seeing you happily talking away.
Yeah.
Nobody can hear you.
I'm a senior. What do you want? Okay, I want to speak to the issue of Devon's. And I know someone may say, oh, it's only 3 more miles away or something like that. But in a perception from most of the seniors that I talk to, there's very little interest in going to Devon's. You know, we want to be in Ayer. We'd prefer to be just Ayer and not affiliated with another town like Shirley. Shirley's a very nice little thing that they do, but you know, we'd like it to be in Ayer. We'd like it to be someplace accessible and, you know, recognizable. And that's why, because it's so close to where the senior center has been, this site already has identity with town seniors. I do think when I first saw the plan and I saw that we were losing part of the field, I asked a lot of questions about what was going to happen to the groups that were using that. And it sounded like there was another field that was already available, maybe at the middle school, but was not maintained. That could then be, the maintenance budget could be put there, and a lot of the people could go right there and have a field. And I do think that this gymnasium is very important from a recreational point of view for the town and the young people and the older people as well. And that it is recreation, and it might not all be outdoor recreation there. But I think it's, you know, I think it may be the only solution we have to getting this done and being in Ayer. That's what it sounds like to me. We've already been waiting since 2018 when the plan was coming together. So it's been 5 years and we're practically back at stage 1. So I hope that the board will move ahead and start to plan more assertively on this idea and move ahead. That's all.
Thank you, Ellen. Michael?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand you have a lot more to do tonight, and that this is a pressing issue. I know we need to move on from this conversation. I would just ask that the board entertain a motion from the board to table this until another time to due process. It wouldn't even get put on a town meeting until the fall. I think that the location is right now, whenever you submit something, you always submit a plan B. We're being submitted with a plan A and a plan A only. This is taxpayer dollars being spent by the taxpayers of the town of Ayer. They deserve more than one location choice. The vote needs to go to them. I ask that you table this until you get a plan B. Thank you.
Well, the problem
Madam Chair.
is, so the problem is about tabling this is that we won't be able to then present a plan. So in order to, if the board decides tonight, okay, let's start the process, this will, like it said, open meeting law, you will be able to attend, putting your opportunity in your opinions. I mean, who knows? You might have a great idea that no one's thought of in even the design. And then it would go to town meeting. So Robert, I got a question.
Yeah, and I have a,
Okay, so as far as like, if the board says, okay, let's get this building committee formed, how much money would end up getting spent before we even had a plan to go for town meeting?
there is no money. I mean, that's going to be one of the things that the committee is going to have to do. I want to make it clear, there's no appropriation to do anything. Madam Chair, could I just pull up one map?
Yes.
Because I want to speak to, there actually has been not only a plan A, there's been a plan probably A through F. Plan A was the West Main Street site that was brought before town meeting, and 211 West Main Street, way over on the border of, thank you, Carter. So that was the site. A $30,000 feasibility study was done as authorized by town meeting, all of the due diligence. Article 4 of the fall town meeting asked town meeting to authorize the site as well as $500,000 for the site acquisition and some of the remediation. Town meeting, the debate, there were all kinds of concerns about the environmental, even though it was also presented that we would have to remediate the site and the site could be remediated. There were other just concerns in general. And so 211 West Main Street, and this was from the report, was tabled. So then I put the working group together, and the working group looked at multiple sites that are in the feasibility report from 2018, which is on the town's website. So we went back and looked at all of the other sites that were recommended. In addition, just on Devon's alone, on page 4 of the report, we looked at site on Grant Road, parcels of land off of Scully Road behind Wuzhong. It was found, that's on the side of the Shepley Hill landfill, an old building by the Parker Charter School on Buena Vista Street, even Vicksburg Square, Jackson Road, and Tatum Street, a parcel of land behind the United Native American Cultural Council building. We looked at all kinds of sites on Devon's. And as Ms. Fitzpatrick brought up, we also heard from the director of the senior center. The psychological idea of going out there is not big with a lot of seniors, and there's a lot of seniors in Ayer housing and seniors that don't have transportation and not going to drive out there. Then you'll see all of these red X's on the map that we looked at. Way out up north, 99 Fitchburg Road was the old David E. Ross building. One of the issues there was on septic, and the other feeling was it was sort of on the outside skirts of town. You see 100 Park Street, across 100 Park Street, 1 Bishop Road. We looked at those sites were too small. We looked at, I mentioned 99 Fitchburg Road was sold, 106 Park Street, there were traffic concerns. We looked at the site across from Tiny's, which is a private owned site, and there were wetlands issues, and the price, we even did an appraisal, the price that was wanted was astronomical there. We looked at 6 Groton Road, 115 Washington Street, which people bring up is the old Page Hilltop school. The thought was, well, if they build a new school, could we use that building? I mean, we're about 7 years away. Tonight is just the first step on the school process, at least 7 years. And there were issues there. It's on page, before we talked with the Federated Church and looked at the Federated Church site right downtown, the lot size, programmatic challenges, 0 Park Street, traffic, wetlands, environmental concerns, the McPherson Road, DPW land over on McPherson Road, there's environmental issues. Some of that's in the Oxbow. So, I mean, this is just a quick map. So when the point is made, we're not just coming with a plan A with no plan B. We're at the end. I discussed this with Dr. Pedrazi this afternoon. If we don't pursue this site, then the position will be, unless somebody's going to come forward with a 1.52 acre site that we missed, and it's a ready, and we still would have to buy it. Everything is just going to be on hold until something presents itself.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I recommend you put it on hold. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
thank you. Katie?
I was just going to reiterate what the town manager and Ellen Fitzpatrick said about Devon's, any bureaucratic red tape aside, I'm looking at it from an operational standpoint. And as seniors get older, reaction times slow, reliance upon familiarity becomes stronger. And so locating a senior center outside of the traditional bounds of Ayer creates both a physiological and a mental barrier to participation. And my job is to encourage people to participate, not put up barriers to participation. And additionally, from a transportation perspective, it's a blessing that Ayer is geographically so small. It allows us to service a lot of clients in a short period of time. And the more that we expand that on a minute by minute back and forth basis across town and into Devon's, it just decreases the number of people that we can service in a day. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I have 2 more hands up. Dennis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to kind of piggyback on what Robert said, we did look at and diligently looked at many, many sites around town, and I didn't fully appreciate this process until I was involved in it. But not only do we have to consider whether or not the site would be appropriate to meet our purposes, but you also have to have a site which the private property owner wants to part with. That is, it's not the case that we can simply say, this is an ideal spot for what we want to do, let's put it there. We would also have to have the other party be willing to sell it, allow us to acquire it, be willing to work through the bureaucratic and financial needs in order to, transfer ownership of it. It's not simply the case that there may be other ideal sites. Whoever's in possession of those other sites will also have a large part to play in whether or not that ever happens, which is, kind of the fundamental issue with Devon's and with some of the other privately owned property in town. We did the RFP. Again, as Robert mentioned, there was only one response, and that was a non-appropriate response from someone over at Devon's. So you need a partnership in order to be able to do this. And for the town of Ayer, it seems like the likely and the obvious partnership is between the senior center and the Parks and Rec Department.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Ayer Senior Center?
Marge Withy. I use the senior center quite often, 2 or 3 times a week. And from the people that come, I really don't think most people would go to Devon's. And the ones that live here and the ones on Pleasant Street, the residents, those in the wheelchairs love the idea that it's right down on Peroni. They can get there without needing Sam. They find the availability of the programs very convenient for them to get to. It's the ideal place for them. As far as if you put it up at a school during the daytime with children running, I taught in a school. You really don't want that every single day, but kids running between the cars, dismissal. I just think it's a new can of worms. You've got a couple of times a year. I think the idea, though, school vacations, you're not bringing, I love the idea of having adults and kids at school vacation times together, being able to do programs. Those who don't have grandkids living close by, it's awesome. The seniors here are so excited. Bring the programs, it's tremendous. But as far as if you put it someplace where we can't get to it, it's unavailable. We can't use it.
Okay.
So,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Lori, the last one.
Yep, and I'll be very quick. I appreciate everybody's concern about Devon's feeling like it's too far, but I would stand by the fact that that's because we're not used to it. And I appreciate, as I'm getting older, it's harder to get used to new things, but we also need to look at incoming generations. And yes, we want to have this decision made quickly for the people that would take advantage of it right now, but we need to look at the long-term impact of all of this. We had to get used to the middle school being located in Shirley. We did, and we can do this again. I don't think we should see this as a foreign place, and appreciate that as a consideration. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take whoever's on this B phone, and then that'll be the end of the comments. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to rename my phone. This is Beth Sidmeyer. I live on Nashua Street. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I really appreciate, Madam Chair, the opportunity to comment. I'm sorry I did not get to see the full proposal, but I have looked through the meeting materials and I understand that the current proposal is to continue to look at Peroni Park as a site for the community center location. And I realize and I appreciate the extent to which the volunteers and the committee have worked to try and identify a site. And I know that it's been a real challenge and that nothing, ideal really came up. I appreciate the creativity in looking at Peroni Park as a potential site, but I do really want to request that there would be much more public process before a decision would be made, because I think that Peroni Park is one of the most valuable park and recreation spaces. It is the most valuable park and recreation space in town, I think. And I would not want to jump into a decision about advancing a proposal such as this without a lot more public process, and also with a master plan, a true master plan study of Peroni Park to determine if you are going to put a building there, where should the building go? Because I don't think that thoughtfulness has been put in place in proposing the location that's currently being considered. And I understand that there are comments from individuals, at least, indicating that the current proposed location is not significantly utilized, but I don't even think there's been enough consultation with the schools yet to make such a decision. I understand that they sometimes use playfields at Peroni Park, and we really have a need for more playgrounds. I know, the partnership with Aaron Shirley for soccer fields, for example. My daughter can't start generally, if last year's an indication, playing on a field at the time that they need to start practice because they're too wet in Shirley. So I do not want to make decisions at this point in time that will mean that we reduce our options for playfields in the future. And I don't want to make decisions based on current use patterns. I want to make decisions based on needs in the future as well as current use patterns. So I just really, I don't want to say that I would never support a Peroni Park proposal, but I do think a full master plan of use and considering future uses for Peroni Park is needed before you start planning a building on Peroni Park. Because once the building's there, we're not going to have options. We're not going to have the flexibility anymore. And I definitely do endorse and support the idea of a true community center, not just advocating or allocating all of these resources just for the senior center, but that we could do a really nice mix of multifunction rooms that can serve multiple populations. Thank you so much for considering my comment.
Mm-hmm. So just to catch you up, Beth, one of the things is this is just being asked for the select board to approve the process to go forward so that a building committee could be established, which would be under the open meeting law, which would be available to the public to attend for everyone to have a piece of the conversation before it ever got to town meeting for the town to vote on the plan and say, that's it. So just to catch you up on that. Okay.
But I would that vote doesn't narrow down the location that committee will work, because then we've already lost the public process for site selection.
Well, I think that if you look through the packet too, that you'll see that in the last 2 years, everything that's been going on and some of the problems that have been established. And as far as the master plan, I do believe it might be in the master plan, though I could be corrected on that, as far as, building a community center or some type of a gym.
Sorry.
Which the master plan is also due to get updated again too.
Right.
So,
but my
but thank you.
Just for Peroni Park, to create a plan for Peroni Park before you decide you're going to put a building there.
Well, which we can't decide on anything until we approve a plan to work together to come up with something. Because then the town could have a full plan of being able to see what the picture would look like, what would be there, and then say yay or nay.
Does anyone else understand what, I'm sorry, I'm not expressing it well, maybe. But
I think that it's just that what's being missed is it's in the packet and how many sites have been looked at. So that's the part that we're at, is we're limited, and we'd like to be able to present the next step is what everyone's asking to do. So we're going to go through this left and right tonight, and I'm sorry, we do have to get on the rest of the agenda. So I'm going to ask Scott and Sean about their comments that they may have at this time.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, it's good comments from everyone, but I do want to stress, which you have reiterated, this is part of a process and it's early in the process. So, I mean, myself personally, I am all for moving this forward and with this current iteration. I understand that, yes, there's some concerns that this is only one proposal, but this is also the second proposal, and there have been multitude of other sites that have been looked at. I do actually want to just kind of say one thing. When Lori Nearing did mention about the middle school being in Shirley and we got used to it, as a parent who had 3 kids go through that middle school is you actually don't really get used to it. It is, you know, when you're used to being in a small town geographically, to have to drive over to Shirley to pick your kids up from ski club or go, you know, to watch their sports over there. It is actually a lot. And I could not imagine requiring, you know, the aging population of our community to drive, you know, an extra, you know, 10 to 15 minutes to have to go socialize at a senior center or take advantage of activities there. So that's where I'm at with this proposal.
Okay.
I'm also in favor of moving the proposal forward so that all the additional work can be done. I appreciate everybody's comments tonight. I also appreciate the work that the group did over the last 18 months to get us to this point. And I can see some of the downsides, but I also think this is a good opportunity for Ayer.
Okay, so Robert, no money would get spent until town meeting approved a plan. Would that be correct?
Correct. As I said in the beginning, what we are recommending, that's up to the board, is to put together, if you want to move it forward, is to vote to form an official building committee for the project, which the charge is basically on page 7 of the report, to oversee the conceptual plan development, to include extensive public outreach and participation in the conceptual design, identify and secure funding for the design of the project, oversee the final design of the project. So correct, there is no money at this time for this project. That would have to be from town meeting. And I think the challenge we've all grappled with is, if you just go to town meeting and say, do you want this site or not? There's going to be a million questions. There has to be a process to look at it. Maybe even during this process, there could be there could be some inherent barrier to the site, very likely. 2, there could be some unforeseen thing. 3, somebody could come forward with you know, another site. So we're just recommending at this point, after where we're at starting in 2018, whether if the board wants to pursue vetting this site through a public building committee, then we should proceed. It will have to come to town meeting, and there would have to be a lot of public outreach, which has already started with respect to the site.
Well, I agree. The only way we're going to be able to really get this into a public where the public has their opinions being heard is to go the next step.
Madam Clerk, just a point of clarification. So the motion that we need is just to form the building committee. Is that the correct motion?
Correct.
I believe, yes.
Yeah.
I will make a motion that the Ayer Select Board approve the formation of a building committee to review the Center for Active Living as proposed.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. I think that it's very important that everybody who was a part of tonight to also be a part going forward, because it was a very good conversation. And I think a lot of good points were brought up by everyone. So I look forward to seeing the building committee being formed and seeing what happens.
Thank you for moving this along and not just tabling it.
Okay, all right. Next minute, I lost the agenda. Okay. All right, next up is Dan.
Hi again.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, I'll try to be brief. So, one agenda item for DPW tonight, execution of an easement agreement with the National Grid for the Jonathan Drive cross-country water main. So after working with National Grid and Town Council, we've developed an agreement for an easement across the high-tension power lines between Pleasant Street Extension and Jonathan Drive. And that was included in the packet. So I'm recommending that the board execute the easement agreement with New England Power Company.
Any questions, Scott or Sean?
I don't have any.
No
Okay.
questions for me. Thank you.
I have no questions.
I'll make a motion that the select board, oh, sorry. Yeah. I'll make a motion that the select board approve the execution of the easement agreement with National Grid for Jonathan Drive cross-country water main.
Second.
Sorry.
It was a little tongue twister, wasn't it? Okay, all those in favor, Sean,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. All right, town managers report.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. In the interest of time, you have the warrants that were approved since the board last met in the packet. In terms of the administrative update, the focus is, as it is every time at this year, is the finalization of the budget and the town meeting warrant, which we'll get right into. I just want to point out for the board and the public's benefit that construction for the base for the howitzer has started at Town Hall. We've got some inquiries. That's what the front end loader on the front lawn has been. So we move forward with that project. Unless there aren't any administrative questions from the board, I'll move right into the action items for this evening. I do have one recommendation for appointment. I'm respectfully recommending and requesting that the select board vote to appoint Ms. Marilyn Schallenberger of Ayer as an alternate member of the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire on June 30th of 2024. And you have Marilyn's letter of interest in the packet.
Okay. Any questions?
I didn't have any.
All right, I have none.
I'll make a
mo-
motion.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Okay. I'll make a motion that the select board approve the appointment of Marilyn. I'm going to pronounce that wrong. Robert, how do you pronounce her last name?
Schallenberger.
Okay, yeah. Marilyn Schallenberger as the alternate member for the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire on June 30th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Sean,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. Oh, Marilyn, did you want to speak? She's
Um,
on. Oh, there she is.
I just want to compliment you on the attempt at saying my last name. It's actually Schmallenberger, but you came pretty close.
All right.
Schmallenberger, okay. Thank you for letting us know that. So, well, congratulations on your appointment. Did you want to add anything or?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. I look
Okay.
forward to serving.
All right.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the next item, and I do know that the select board and the finance committee are going to meet in joint session on April 4th to finalize the budget and the warrant. So for the purposes of this evening, I'll be brief. And if there's any questions from the board, you have in your packet the final draft of the budget as of March 23rd of 2023. This was transmitted to you and the finance committee on the 23rd. It's also posted on the town's website, and hard copies available upon request through my office. I want to thank Barbara Tierney, the finance manager, for putting this together. Just a couple of highlights. You'll see on final draft, we highlighted in green where there were further changes from draft 3. I am pleased to report that we were able to get the overall increase below $1 million of the omnibus budget at $942,459, or a 5.56% increase. The areas where we were able to identify some potential reductions was 30,000 from management support, 19,000 in general insurance, as the insurance numbers did come in since draft 3. On the fire department, a $20,000 reduction in the overtime, and another $7,300 reduction within the department. Veterans services, about a $25,000 reduction, but that's being driven by the census of veterans served. It is in no way a reflection of the town's commitment and support to veterans, but talking with the Veterans Commissioner, Mr. DePillion, there was an opportunity for a reduction there, and then about another 5,000 from other areas. So this is sort of the final budget from our end. I know that the Finance Committee is meeting on March 29th to review the budget, and will also be with the Select Board on April 4th. So if there are any questions from the board on the budget, and I know we'll be discussing again on the 4th. Okay, very briefly, because I know you'll be reviewing and approving the warrants at April 4th. Just give a brief overview of the draft warrant that is in your packet. The first item I want to point out is there is the need for a special town meeting right before the annual town meeting. There are 3 articles for supplemental appropriations. We have done these before with respect to the enterprise funds. The reason it's a special town meeting is upon action by town meeting, the funds are available, and these funds are needed for the current year. Article 1 and Article 2, the water and sewer enterprise funds, the DPW director and the water and sewer superintendent came before the board about a month ago. And as the explanatory notes indicate, significant increases in chemicals, unexpected well maintenance in the case of the sewers, the boiler repairs and so forth have necessitated these supplemental appropriations. Article 3 on the ambulance, in working with the finance manager and the fire chief, a $20,000 supplemental appropriation. Again, factors driving that have been cost increases and unforeseen call volume. So that's the, if you will, the special town meeting warrant. And then we go right to the annual town meeting warrant, which is pretty standard from previous years. There are 30 articles. A lot of them are very familiar to the board and to the public. I'll just go very quickly on highlights of some of the articles. Article 2 is the contract funding for the town hall clerical union. There'll be a brief presentation at town meeting. Article 3, of course, is the omnibus, which there will be a presentation, as well as the moderator going through the lines and people asking to speak on items. Article 4 and 5 are the schools. Articles 6 through 9 are the enterprise articles that we have every year to fund the enterprise. Article 10 are the capital requests recommended by the capital planning committee that we borrow for. So this is generally anything over $50,000 that we would be borrowing for. Departments will be prepared for presentation and questions on these specific items. In Article 10, you can find all of that on the budget page under the capital plan. Article 11 and Article 12 are the 2 debt exclusion articles. Article 11 is for the fire ladder truck. Article 12 is for the West Main Street Bridge. Both of these will have brief presentations at town meeting. Both require a 2/3 majority vote to pass. And as the board is aware, this is step 1 of a 2-part process on debt exclusions. It has to pass town meeting and the ballot on May 9th. Then Article 13 are the smaller capital items that we have traditionally per policy pay for out of capital stabilization. So these are generally projects around 50,000 and below. There are two one at 65 and one at 68,000, a little higher, but we had a lighter capital year last year. Article 14 is the GASB OPEB fund, $300,000 that we've traditionally had. Article 15 is the replacement of the Ayer Library Trust funds, the replenishment of 35,000 for an emergency heat repair that was done. There are only two raise and appropriate articles. One is Article 16 is the general fund borrowing for the first year interest on what's borrowed above. And second is the funding for the aquatic weed control for the town's ponds from the Conservation Commission. Article 18, and I want to point out, I know that the BI board will be meeting tomorrow. We'll be meeting with the FinCom on Wednesday, and on the 4th, on these next articles, just in full disclosure, this is what we're putting forward recommended from our end. There may be some further discussion. Article 18 is $10,000 into the compensated absences article. Article 19 is $300,000 of the free cash to forward fund the town's pension assessment. Article 20 is UDAG fund replenishments. There were 3 projects that were approved to use UDAG funds for which there was no replenishment, as you can see in the article. Article 21, which was presented to the BI board and we discussed at the select board, is proposal from the finance manager to pay down the balance of a maturing ban using $322,000 of free cash to realize approximately $90,000 in savings. Article 22 is the stabilization article for both the stabilization and capital. This is just what we have presented. I know there'll be more discussion, I'm sure, on the 4th. It looks to put, as Article 22 stands now, and this is just a draft, $313,000 in stabilization. Of what we're saying, $300,000 of that is to take into account the cost impact from the SAFER grant, and $750,000 into capital stabilization. We'll discuss obviously more on the 4th with the FinCom with respect to that. Then there is a series, Articles 23 and 24 and 25. These are transfers of unexpended bond proceeds. So these are projects that town meeting previously authorized to borrow or to bond on, and the projects are completed, but there's a balance and town meeting can apply that to other projects. It's been a few years since we've had some of these. The first one, Article 23, looks to transfer $10,348 from the original DPW operations project, which has been long completed, and apply this to the replacement gate for the DPW yard. Article 24 takes $85,943 from the Groton Shirley Road low pressure sewer project, which has been completed, and applies this to the Central Ave pumping station valve project. Article 25, $61,201 from the Groton Shirley Road water main loop project, which has been completed, and applies that to the new well source project. Article 26 actually takes $1,250 from the stormwater asset plan grant match, which was completed. And actually Article 26 would transfer the $1,250 into capital stabilization. So these are sort of cleanup articles, if you will, that between the finance manager and the town accountant from time to time, we'll go through it and present these. Article 27 is the rescind of prior borrow authorizations. So these are borrow authorizations that occurred at previous town meetings. You can see the unissued amount, the date of approval, the warrant article, and the original purpose, and it rescinds these. So again, it's a cleanup article. The finance manager will be prepared to present and speak on that at town meeting as well as on April 4th. Article 28, 29 of the CPC articles. 28 is their standard article every year from the Community Preservation Act. Article 29 is for the Peroni Park Playground Project, looking to put $750,000 towards that project. And then the last article, not a financial article, but Article 30 is the authorization to initiate a municipal aggregation program, as we've discussed with the board in my office, and I know the select board have heard from many residents, especially since the recent energy hikes back in November, about an aggregation program for residents in which residents could opt into at potential savings. The first step in that process requires authorization by town meeting. So that's what Article 30 of town meeting authorizes us to proceed with the process to establish this. So that's the first step. The deadline for warrant articles is this Friday at noon. And that's just a brief, overview. I don't know if there are any questions from the board at this time.
I have none. Sean, Scott?
I have none.
Okay.
The next item is the adoption of Chapter 269 of the Acts of 2020, which let me just grab from in your packet. State law taking into account the inflationary costs and the increased economic costs facing many retirees, facing everyone, but the state passed Chapter 269, which would allow a one-time cost of living adjustment of 5% on the first $16,000 of the base for retirees. So the Middlesex Retirement Board voted to adopt Chapter 269 that would allow a one-time 5% for this year on the first 16,000 of all retirees in the Middlesex retirement system. However, the law requires a second step that 2/3 of the member communities, of which Ayer is one of them, need to adopt the provision by June 30th for this to go into effect. Barbara ran the analysis that if the town of Ayer was to adopt this, the estimated cost impact would be $275,520 that would not start in our assessment until FY26. And that would be from FY26 through FY36, so a 10-year period. So we would begin to, if the board adopted this, the cost impact would come through our assessment at approximately a $27,000 increase each year over a 10-year period starting in FY26. I'd also add, if we continue to forward fund our pension assessment, there would be further savings on that end. And lastly, as of March 15th, it is our understanding that 9 of the 22 members of the retirement system have voted to adopt it.
So you said FY26?
Would be the first time we would see this in the assessment.
So that would be July 1st, 2025, right? Because that would be FY26.
Correct.
Okay.
And for the whole 10-year period, it's about a $275,000 impact on our assessment over 10 years.
But because we've forward funded, we may not feel the impact like we could have.
Right.
Would that be correct?
Correct. So if we continue to forward fund the pension, which town meeting has been doing the last couple of years, for example, our pension assessment only went up about 1.6% this year. If we hadn't forward funded it, it would have been like a 6% increase. So we're just saying is if we continue to forward fund the assessment, that would further minimize the impact.
Okay. Any questions, Sean, Scott?
I don't have any. No.
I have no questions. I've already asked my question. Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion or?
Yeah. I move that the select board approve the one-time COLA adjustment for retirees as presented.
I'll second it. All those in favor, Sean,
Aye.
Scott,
I think he's
Scott.
muted.
Scott? We can't hear you.
Sorry, aye.
Okay. And the chair says aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Item number 6, almost done. As the board continues to discuss the use of ARPA funds, the DPW director and I got together and want to put forward a proposal for your consideration tonight. And I put the memo in the packet. So as we've discussed, the town's original, ARPA funds of about $2.5 million, which are under the select board. And the select board has so far committed to 2 projects that were infrastructure. And infrastructure is one of the preferred categories under ARPA, because the theory is that the infrastructure benefits the whole community. That was the Westford Road sewer and water main and the Spectacle Pond water transmission line. And there is a debt exclusion needed for the West Main Street Bridge replacement project, as everybody knows, is recommended by the Capital Planning Committee. And it is in dire need to be repaired, to be replaced. And everybody goes over it, and it's a huge project. So what we're proposing, as I put in my memo, as recommended by the Capital Planning Committee, the debt exclusion was for 3.5 million. That was for the whole project, including the contingency. We're pleased to report tonight, or I should say through the memo, through Dan's efforts, that he did get the small bridge grant reinstated at 500,000 by Mass DOT. So the good news is it's actually at 3 million. What we're proposing your consideration is authorizing another 500,000 from ARPA for this project. It would bring the total debt exclusion down to 2.5 million. If you were to do that, we would still have a balance of just over $1 million, $1,062,000 in ARPA funds, which the board can continue to, review and discuss and develop a plan. And we wanted to propose this for your consideration this evening. Again, it's up to the board. The debt exclusion right now will be at 3 million. We're recommending or requesting your consideration for another 500,000 in ARPA to bring it down to 2.5 million. And I would just point out lastly, on the Westford Road project, which was 700,000, the DPW director, through the competitive bidding, worked in our favor, actually turned back about 200,000 of that wasn't needed. Is that right, Dan?
No, actually, it's about 450,000.
450,
Yeah, the
yeah.
other way around. Yeah.
So there was a savings.
Oh, hold on, my battery's dying. Hold on. It's plugged in. It says it's not plugged in. Okay, I think I'm going to be okay. All right, it says it's plugged in, so I don't know. Oh, shoot. Okay. You all can continue talking. I'm trying to fix.
So that's
my view.
our recommendation for your consideration, Madam Chair, is the board to authorize $500,000 in ARPA funds towards the West Main Street Bridge project, which would make the debt exclusion at 2.5 million.
This is, yeah, when you had asked previously to think about ways to spend the money, this is actually one of the ways I thought would be a good use of it. So I would definitely be supportive of it.
My question is, what's the actual savings to the taxpayer by putting the 500,000 to this project as opposed to holding on possibly for, say, an emergency later down the line?
Madam Chair, through you, Barbara. Yeah.
Hi, Robert. Let me just, if you don't mind bearing with me, I'll see if I can pull that up for you.
Just one moment. I know we ran the scenarios on that. And well, I just want to point out, Madam Chair, Dan and I continue to actively look for other funding. As the board is aware, we've sent another letter to Mass DOT. Dan has had some conversations. When Congresswoman Trahan was here last week, we've been talking with her office. Our goal is to find as much funding as possible to continue to lower this. Selectman Hood's point, though, is well taken. Let's see what Barbara pulls up is what is the benefit. And again, this is a recommendation. Not necessarily required. It was just something we thought of, Dan and I, in looking at potential uses for it.
I want to apologize. I just moved my office, so yeah. I have to sift through some emails.
So while she's looking at that, so if we were to do this, the town would still have a balance of approximately a little over $1 million in the ARPA funds?
Correct. And you have till December 31st of 2024 to commit the funds, and you have till December 31st of 2026 to actually spend the funds.
Okay, good.
So I guess what Barbara is looking for the numbers. Part of the reason I ask is part of the conversations that we had earlier this evening around the elementary school, but also the senior center. So, my initial thought is, looking at the taxpayer impact for capital for this year, because we do have some projects that are dropping off in addition, while these will kind of take those place in the tax base. If we're more level this year with what's leaving versus and what's coming on, it may be worth saving this for future expenses to offset capital project costs in the future when we are looking at, dual projects of a senior center, and also potential elementary school.
I have a question. Oops. So sorry. So a question on that, Scott. If you're saying save these funds for those projects?
Or for other projects, yeah. So from a timing perspective, it would be to save the ARPA funds because we have another year and 9 months to commit them to something. In the capital planning submissions, there was some other water and sewer that's planned for the next year or two. There's a large one on Sandy Pond Road, which I think, if I remember correctly, the price tag on that was $1.6 million or so. So that's kind of my thought. I understand that, yes, the $3.5 million price tag for a 20-foot bridge that no one knows is there is extreme. But I'm just wondering if, we're more beneficial taking a longer approach to committing these funds to other projects that when we have actions to take on a senior center and then action shortly after that on a possible elementary school, that it might be worth actually committing those towards a future project.
Okay.
I have that information. The assessor did do some projections. If we leave it at the higher amount, it would have been about 11 cents on the tax rate for a residential, which would be about $49.50 on the tax bill for a median household. And by decreasing the debt by that $500,000, the residential impact on the tax rate, it would be 9 cents. So it'd save 2 cents off the tax rate, and the median household impact would be $40.50. So it's about a $10 annual difference. But over the life, it would become a very substantial savings because you're looking at future interest.
What would be the length of the borrow for that?
So we have that borrow at the full 20 years, which is the standard for a bridge.
So it sounds like it would be a savings.
Yeah, it definitely would save.
So at $9, the difference is $9 a year over 20 years is $180 total savings for the taxpayer. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would, I guess if the board would like, I mean, we would, I guess a decision either way would probably be needed by the 4th. In other words, if people want to think about it, you know, again, we could revisit when you do the review of the warrant. I mean, the article is already going to change from 3.5 to 3 million.
Yes, and the projection difference I gave you is including taking off the so I did a comparison of 3 million to 2.5 million. That's what those figures are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you guys want to wait until April 4th?
Yeah, we could do that. I'm okay with
Yeah,
that.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, honestly, I'm gonna be completely blunt and honest. I would like to save the ARPA funds for other projects. And that's really where I'm leaning. But if you want to take a formal vote on the 4th, given the hour with this meeting, I'm perfectly fine doing that.
Let's think it over a little bit more and make our formal decision on the 4th.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep. Last, number 7, recommending that the board vote to approve Amendment 1 to the cell tower agreement with SBA Towers 2 LLC. What Amendment number 1 does is it just links up the start date of the new agreement. So the lease, we're still under the current agreement, which expires on October 6th of 2023. Amendment 1, it will commence on October 6th of 2023.
Any questions?
No. I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 1 with the cell tower agreement with SBA Towers 2 LLC as presented.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Sean?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Okay.
Madam Chair, that concludes my report unless there's any questions from the board. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Could we just have the info for the updated numbers in the packet for the ARPA for next week? So,
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so all right, it's me. All right, I'm trying to remember what I was gonna be doing. Okay. So as some of us know, out in Devens by the old airfield, they do car racing, pretty much from April to October. Okay. And it's every Saturday and Sunday. And it's at least 8 hours long. And it is quite the noise pollutant. Okay. And so we were approached, Robert Allen and I, and since then I've talked to others who have a problem with this noise. I mean, it's constant. So it's a okay, 8 hours of that on a Saturday and Sunday. I can definitely hear it where I live, which is above, on William Street. And I know it can be heard out by the hospital and maybe even further there. Okay. What it is that Mass Development has 9 contracts, 9, right, Robert?
Yes.
Yeah, that basically give them $80,000, and it's not bothering any of them because they don't hear it because of how the sound is traveling. And so within the packet, you see a draft letter where we're asking Mass Development to start, we need to solve this, and they need to start understanding the impact of what it's doing to the people. So $80,000, I don't think is worth all of us having to listen to that noise every weekend. And it is every weekend. There is no break. We were never a part of that decision. And it's high time that they started including us and start understanding the impacts to people. Okay. I know some people are like, oh, well, okay, just close your windows. Well, on a nice day when it's breeze, it's coming through and everything, you don't want to close your windows. And with electricity prices, you certainly don't want to turn on the air conditioner any sooner than you have to. Okay. But I think that some people, it doesn't bother some people, and that's fine. But those that it bothers, it is awful. Having worked with white noise, if anyone ever, and sometimes you had somebody who would adjust the volume on the white noise, it was absolute chaos as to what it could do to people. Okay. So because it's late, and I'd like everyone to kind of look over this letter, and maybe if you have any input as to how it's written. But basically, we're trying to tell Mass Development, that's great, you've got this little project, but here's what it's doing to us. Alan worked with this, I've worked with this. We want to send a copy to Senator Eldridge and Representative Senna and et cetera, so that they're aware of the impact to the residents. And I'm kind of leaning towards, I had kind of worked on one of the paragraphs and just kind of rewording it. Well, not rewording it, but I had basically taken some sentences and added the periods to make it a little bit more boom, boom, boom. And personally, I think I'm leaning to making it whole separate lines so that it stands out as far as, we've had no say. This is all day long, every weekend, and it's impacting us. So it's getting late, and I want everyone to have a chance to look at this. And on April 4th, I'm hoping that the board will decide to say yes, and we can get this sent. It'll probably end up being a multi-letter process to get Mass Development's attention, but we have to start the process. Any questions?
Madam Chair, I would like some time to review this myself, so I appreciate that offer. I guess the only question per se is there any legal recourse that we would have against Mass Development if they continue with the auto crossing?
Well, see, that's a good question.
Et cetera.
Yeah, because I believe Chapter 498 indicates something about noise. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
But basically saying that,
before we take this up then.
Yeah, you can't, I'll have it there, but it does indicate where, hey, whatever you're doing shouldn't have a negative impact on the rest of us. Okay. Now I know that there are some that would like us to be able to tell Mass Development, you just stop it. But we know that there's contracts and everything, but they need to start paying attention to the impact as to what this is doing to all of us.
That I completely agree with you on. So
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I do think that we have some say. And then of course there's our personal bylaw, which I don't know if we can hold them to our personal bylaw, but I would certainly throw it in the pile to say, hey, here's another indication of it's too noisy. So, okay. So we'll have it back on the agenda for the 4th.
Yeah. One request, can I get a Word document just to mark up in the document itself, please? Thank you.
Yep.
So that's all I have under new business. So that brings us to the meeting minutes from March 7th, 2023. I didn't see any issues.
Nope.
I have no issues.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the March 7th, 2023 meeting as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Sean?
Aye. Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. And where is it? Where's page one? Ah, that's my agenda again. So now we're going to move into executive session.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the board go to executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A, exemption number 3, union negotiations, ratification of the Town Hall Clerical Union Contract, MOA, and that the select board will adjourn directly out of executive session and will not be returning to open session.
Second that.
Okay. All those in favor? Scott?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Good night, everybody. We are now in executive session.